Welcome to the Underdog Sniper Podcast. I am your host, MGCovers. This is episode 50. Greatly appreciate everybody tuning in today. Have a ton to cover. Missed last week, but hopefully we are back where we can normally record this every Monday. I'm usually late as always, but hey, better late than never. All right, we got a ton to talk about in this podcast, so let's review and go through the outline. We're going to talk about the March Madness basketball tournament. It was brand new. We'll tell you the success we have with that. Also going to talk about my client's MLB totals model. Ton of success with that. And very interesting. I meant to talk about this last week when we missed a podcast. We're going to talk about the most neglected situational angle in sports betting. This is super simple, super fascinating. There's a ton of educational value understanding this concept, and it's very neglected, which it's rare to hear other quote sharps talk about this, but it will improve your handicapping drastically, applying this basically to all sports. And then finally, we hit 3,000 subs on YouTube. So greatly appreciate everybody that tunes in. We're going to do a giveaway at the end, and we'll talk about what that is and how you can be part of that giveaway. All right, so let's dive into it. Let's take a look at this college basketball model. We'll go through this, and this is brand new. So anytime you roll anything out that is brand new, you have to be, I guess, cautious. I was nervous that I wasn't sure that this would actually work. But one thing that I have improved on, and I need to give myself more credit, is a lot of times I went through this long thread on Instagram about this, is that I don't think there's a right or wrong way to introduce a model and start wagering on a model. If you've never created a model before and you do a 50 game back test and it's profitable for you, it might not be advantageous to start wagering real live money. But I think for me, I've got to a point where my modeling has improved like tenfold in the last 2 years. I think because of my experience, when I introduce a new model and I quote feel good about it, I think it's okay to wager, a certain amount of money. We wagered very small, but was extremely profitable with this particular model. So we'll review the numbers. 318, that was the North Carolina game. I think on Wednesday night went 1-0. Then on Thursday, it goes 5-4. No underdogs with this model, the way we had it structured. And then the model goes 6-1 on Friday. Then it goes 3-1 on Saturday, and it had one losing day, which was yesterday. It goes 2-4. And just kind of review the plays from yesterday. UConn and Florida, the very close game there. We had Florida minus 15. UConn covered that one. We had Duke in a blowout, and that was a huge blowout. A couple pick'em games there. The game we actually played Maryland, and I thought they had the biggest difference there as far as it felt like Colorado State was moving up in class, playing a better team, probably the best team they played all year. Could have easily won that game. Maryland with the miracle bank shot there to win it. So we lost that one. Ole Miss and Iowa State, even though we had Iowa State favored here and they lost via the model, we actually played Ole Miss. I felt like the SEC was very undervalued in the tournament. I'm going to talk about why in just a second. And we had some positive line movement. That line was at 5.5. It moved down to 5 in favor of Ole Miss. Felt like that was a great play. So ended up going 1-1, but still profitable there with Ole Miss. I think we got it at plus 198, I believe. And that's another tip too. When you look at, if you want to see if granted the line moved from 5.5 to 5, but when I actually played that line, it had moved from like 205 down to 198. That was at Pinnacle. So a lot of times, if you want to see if sharps are playing the money line, just look at the money line movement to be sure. And I think the money line movement actually closed at like plus 180 or something. So we got great closing line value there. New Mexico, Michigan State, that was a close one. No, Michigan State covered that one. I think it was close early on. And then Oregon and Arizona won, but did not cover. So the only losing day for the model was yesterday at 2-4. So that was 17-10. That is 63%. And I graded this at minus 110 odds. So that was 17-10, 63%, 6 units. And the ROI on that is 20%. And what I actually wagered, we went 11-6. So a little bit less volume, but still profitable. Super excited about this model. Now I do believe it's going to it will get very difficult to handicap now because you have, quote, better teams playing each other now. And what I want to show next is let's take a look at, I want to talk about these lines. And I went back and read some of Bob McCune's book called Education of a Sports Bettor. If you're listening and don't know who Bob McCune is, that's how I learned the business back 2013, 14. I bought a lot of his books. He was a sharp back in the day. He's passed, but a book he wrote that has just great contents, a great foundation for learning and understanding his business the book is titled Education of a Sports Bettor. And one thing he talked about with regards to lines was he said you would be surprised at how lines are calculated, meaning there's no statistical formula that the sports books used. The basic understanding and the thing you need to know about bookmaking, it's based on public perception because they can't set the lines the way we set the lines. And what I mean by that, so you take a look at, let's take a look at Illinois and Kentucky here, right? All right, so let me make sure this is working. Something's weird popping up on my screen. Okay, here we go. All right, so take a look at Illinois and Kentucky, right? All right, so if we click on this, look at Illinois' record. Illinois was 23-13, 24-11 for Kentucky, right? So as far as their records look very close, right? This is what the lines are based on. And Bob McCune talked about that in this book, is that the majority of people, so here's the sequence. The books set the lines based on public perception, basically what the marketplace perceives these teams to be. So first off, what does the general public look at? The general public looks at year to date. They look at a Kentucky team. This Kentucky team's 24-11. We look at Illinois' 22-13. Both of them won the first round of the of the tournament. This is to go to the Sweet 16. Both of these teams are good, so the line's basically even. And in fact, if you look at the line itself, we'll go back and show you that they had the line moved in favor of Illinois. So it opened at +1, ended up closing at -2.5 for Illinois. However, I believe these SEC teams in the tournament were far greater than any other conference in the tournament. And so what happened was all these SEC teams, I don't know how many SEC teams went in the tournament. It was like 12. So you have all these great SEC teams playing each other. So what does that mean? That means teams are going to, lose a considerable amount of games because they're all beating up on each other, right? But in reality, they're really good teams. And if you take a look at that, a lot of these SEC teams blew out. You go look at Ole Miss and Iowa State. We'll scroll down and look at that as well. Yeah, same deal there. Look at that. Iowa State was 25-10. Ole Miss was 24-11, right? So the market perceived Iowa State to be the, quote, better team. And Ole Miss took some licks in the SEC. I mean, they got beat up, but they were a really good team. And that was another reason why I decided to roll with Ole Miss on the money line. So the takeaway from this, when you're understanding bookmaking, it's based on public perception. And the public, and I'm going to show you a soccer example here at the end that's going to blow your mind, is that the general public is going to look at those year to date, or the books will tend to shade the line towards the, quote, year to date stats. Iowa State and Ole Miss look relatively even. Iowa State was favored in that situation. With Kentucky, relatively close records, but obviously Kentucky should have been favorites. And look at one more. Look at Alabama and St. Mary's. That's a really good example. St. Mary's was 29-6. Alabama was 27-8. Alabama destroyed St. Mary's, 14 points. That line should have been -10, maybe even -12. Blowout win. And let's take a look at Saturday's actions. Let's see. Whoops. Let's back up here. My bad. The 22. See if we can find some examples here. Yeah, this is a good one. McNeese State and Purdue. You have McNeese State 28-7, Purdue 24-11. Not even close. McNeese State just blown out in that one. 14-point blowout win. Another one, take a look at that one. Speaking of SEC and the competition they played, Arkansas and St. John's. St. John's was the Cinderella team, right? Everybody, quote, wanted St. John's to advance. 31-5 was their year-to-date record, right? So they're perceived to be, quote, better than Arkansas, and they basically got blown out. Arkansas blew them out, 22-13. So really good lesson to learn there with regards to bookmaking. So the simplified, there's a little bit more complexities to it, but not much. It's based on perceived value. Most people, the general public, are going to perceive St. John's to be better here simply because of their record. That's going to be reflected in the line, and it's a great way to find value. So anyway, super excited about the model. Now, I do believe moving forward, this is going to become very difficult. I should put up my lines for the Sweet 16 here today, but a lot of games are going to be tight. And I think now is where you're going to see some shift, and you'll see a lot more dogs cash. Because pretty much from here on out, with the exception of just a couple games, the majority of these games are going to be 50-50 games, which the way that I handicap, and it's also going to reflect that in the model, just coin flip games. So that's going to favor the dog there. So I might do that same approach I did with Ole Miss and try to find games where it looks like the dog's favored, and then move with the line movement as well. Okay, let's move on next to let me find this, the MLB totals model here. Okay. MLB totals model. This is a client that created this, and with his permission, we're able to post these now. And this has been an incredible run. It's had some regression here the last few days, but overall it is now 38 and 25. We'll add that up, see what that is. That's crazy that it's that profitable. 38 plus 25, 38 divided by 63. And we get 60% on the nose. So really good. And it was basically at 70% here last, like 3 days prior. And you can see the last 4 days, 1 and 3, 2 and 2, 2 and 3, 2 and 3. And the good news about that is, reframing it to a positive, it didn't have an 0 for day. A lot of times you'll have, 0 for day where you go 0 for 5. It hasn't done that, but it's been extremely profitable. Really am optimistic that we can take this model to the regular season. You never know when you dive into the regular season, the effectiveness of this, but we'll continue to track it. We'll probably need some data to start at the beginning of the year. I think opening season, I think they're having an early game somewhere overseas, but I think the season will start like April 4th or something. And then once we get maybe a couple weeks of data, we can probably start rolling this out, back testing it first, making sure it's in line, and then of course start playing it live. But these are numbers you see for today. And another indication that totals is beatable for preseason. Let me see if they've released any totals lines here so far. So it's close to game time. They probably have MLB totals. They have totals for 4 games, just the 1 o'clock games. So that's a clear indication that books are very hesitant and realize that that's a quote soft market, meaning it's actually a beatable line. And this model has been way ahead of the market. So super excited to see the direction this model goes once we start the regular season. But big shout out to my client here learning this. If you want to learn how to build models, there's a link in the description of this video. You can sign up. We got a waiting list. I'll start taking new clients probably here pretty soon, next couple of weeks. I think the people that signed up, their coaching goes through like the second week of April. But if you want to get on that mailing list and get notified when we have an opening, you can click there to sign up to do that. All right, next, I want to talk about something super fascinating. We're going to dive into soccer, but this is applicable to all sports. What is the most neglected situational angle when handicapping? And I'll tell you the answer to that. It is form. Form is the most neglected situational angle. And when I say situational angle, the way I learned was Bob McCune taught there's 2 parts to handicapping. You have objective, which is the model, statistically driven, no bias. And then you have subjective, which can be things like line movement, form, injuries, home and away stats, etc. So form, in my opinion, is probably the most neglected situational angle and might produce, close to line movement, some of the better results, meaning like you can get a ton of value by incorporating form into your handicapping. Take a look at Breast. This was the team that we had play via the model. Now let's look at the last 4 games. Last 4 games, they won, they lost 2, and they drew. The line for this game we played was minus 152. So this team had only won 1 out of their last 4 matches, and they were minus 152. Just based on that, does that seem like a good wager? No, because you're laying minus 152 on a team that's only won 1 of their last 4 matches. So see how important form. So you could take the model which showed value, but then when we factor in form, this would actually be a no play. So form extremely neglected in all sports. And I'll tell you this, I have a couple other clients that are doing this with the NBA model. They're using the model to find value and then incorporating form. So if a team has only won 2 out of the last 5 games, it would be a pass. Same as, if a team's won the last 4 out of their 5, obviously it would be a play. And then sometimes you can do that with regards to like Well, let's use the NCAA basketball example. Colorado State had won like 10 games in a row. So factoring form, you can, quote, assume that they would probably cover the line if you're just using form, right? So they hadn't lost. So whatever that line was plus, 6 or whatever the line was, they've covered every line in the last 10 games. So form, a very important situational angle. And I think this one was really fascinating. Okay. Strasbourg was playing, I can't pronounce the team that they're playing against, but look at their last, okay, this is the match they won. Look at the previous 4 matches. They had won 3 out of their 4. And the match that they didn't win, they ended up drawing. And look at the number of goals. They didn't give up any goals. 0. And look at their opponent. Their opponent had only won 2 out of 4. You could have played Strasbourg for plus 152. So amazing how that works. And what I'm going to do with this particular model, I'm going to still keep I'm not going to make any changes to the model or how we calculate the stats. But what I will do is I'm going to incorporate form. And I shared this with, I can't remember if I shared this with all the clients, but I shared it with clients that are subscribed to my plays, how I'm going to structure that. So I'm going to take form and I'm going to assign a number, an actual line to their form, combine that with the stat model to create a, quote, new line. Yeah, let me show you this. Just a quick preview. Like that Brest match we had in the French League, look at the original line. The original line was minus 246, right? Now, with the adjustment, factoring in form, that line moved down to minus 108. So without the form adjustment, that line is minus 246. Book's line is minus 152. We have value. Whereas if we incorporate form, add that to the line, now that Brest line becomes minus 108. Book's line is minus 152. What does that mean? We do not have value. So super excited about this and how we're going to incorporate the changes moving forward. I think they're on I think soccer starts back. They were on like an international break. So excited about wrapping up these major leagues, Bundesliga, Premier League, and incorporating these changes into the model. And then, of course, we have summer rolling around. We'll have MLS as well as Brazil Series A and B and a few other leagues. So a lot to handicap with soccer. All right, finally, we'll close out the podcast. We have finally hit 3,000 subs. So big shout out to everybody that follows this channel. I am so committed to being an education platform for people that want to improve their handicapping and get better. So I'll continue to try to put out really good content. So at this point, I'm going to give away some stuff. What I'm going to have you do, if you're listening to this podcast, I want you to comment podcast in the comment section. That's all you have to do is comment podcast. I'll give it like 3 or 4 days, maybe on like Thursday. I'll go on Instagram and I'll let ChatGPT pick some random numbers. So if we have 30 comments, I'll say pick 3 comments between 1 and 30, and then we'll do some giveaways. I know we'll give away some memberships to the site for a month. Maybe if we get a certain amount of comments, I might even give away a year membership. So yeah, all you have to do to enter that is on this particular video, not on Spotify or Apple iTunes, on YouTube, comment podcast, and you will enter into the drawing. So episode 50 is a wrap. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in. Talk to y'all next week. Peace.